for our Thursday gathering here in our Venture Cafe / Macquarie University Incubator event. Pretty good turnout. So thanks everyone for joining us. If you don't know, my name is Morgan. I'm the Macquarie University Incubator Manager, stepping in for my colleague Ainsley, who's going on maternity leave for 12 months from next Monday. So she's on the call today. So this will be her last Venture Cafe Macquarie University event for a while, but I'm sure that she won't be too far away if we want to call her in to participate in any of these events. So today is a really exciting one because it's all about startups and conversation and focusing on one really big issue, something that we think about a lot here in the university sector, and that's disrupting education. So we're very fortunate at Macquarie University Incubator to have some really amazing startups in our incubator that are focusing on this very challenge. How do we disrupt traditional notions of education? And these guys are doing it through some really innovative and interesting ways and utilizing technology and really questioning what the status quo is doing in education. And so I'm really happy that we're joined today by our amazing panel of Brainy Bucks, YesVR, and the Dr. Egg Adventures. Before we kick off, I do want to, as we always like to do at the university, perform our acknowledgement of country, where we like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the Macquarie University lands, the Wadamadigal clan of the Darug Nation, and pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. And what we also like to do is invite anyone on the chat today to share with us, if you know the traditional owners of the lands where you're sitting and zooming in from, please feel free to share them in the chat. It's always really, really interesting to see where everyone's zooming in from, because we do get people coming in from all over the country and even internationally. So that's always a lot of fun. This is where we're not here. You might see Paul and Dianne have got this building in their background. Unfortunately, we can't be in there at the moment, but this is the Macquarie University Incubator. So we're very fortunate to call this place our home. This is where we and all our startups get to connect and innovate and work together normally on a daily basis. The Macquarie University Incubator, we really see ourselves as the beating heart of entrepreneurship in the university and in Macquarie Park, which is an interesting place to be. We are the connector in the ecosystem between university research, startup entrepreneurs and innovators, students and organizations. And we have some really amazing partners in the park as well. So that's the spiel. Thanks for bearing with me on that. Now what I want to do is stop sharing and open up the floor to our amazing panel. And I'd like to kick off. I never do anyone any justice when I do introductions. So what I like to do is throw it over to you to do the heavy lifting on that. I'm going to ask each of you, Dianne and Paul, maybe from YesVR firstly, can I just get you guys very briefly to introduce yourselves and share with all of us why it is that you're so passionate about what you're doing in education.
Yes, thanks, Morgan. I can start. So my name's Paul King. I'm a co-founder of YesVR, and we're a group of experts in training and film, creating immersive training experiences. I personally have a wide range of experience, including in education and media production. And I work for a large online training organization with over 120,000 students. And this is where I met my co-founder, Dianne. Now, I was pretty frustrated at the lack of innovation to engage students and really wanted to create a more engaging and exciting learning experience for the students. So I started to experiment in new technologies and learning to bring about some change. In late 2016, I tried VR for the first time. I put on this weird looking headset and suddenly I'm transported to another space. I'm in a helicopter flying over Sydney. Oh my God, I feel dizzy. I can't look down, I'm so high. It was such a real experience, and that's what pushed me into the world of VR. Now I get to innovate and do what I love. And my real passion lies in producing the virtual reality stories around the learning. Over to you, Dianne.
Thanks, Paul. You can see how enthusiastic Paul is about VR. I have to say, from my perspective, I've always been passionate about the continually improving the quality of education and training. And as I said before, you can imagine how excited Paul was when he discovered VR, the world of VR. So when he shared the VR experience with me, I automatically became really excited about it and very curious about the potential of it. And so much so that I came out of retirement, believe it or not, and so I could become more involved. As a lifetime learner myself, I was eager to experiment in the ways that VR could actually be used to engage people in learning and to make learning more accessible. It has the capabilities to bridge gaps and barriers to bringing real life visceral experiences into the learning. So that's what I was so keen on doing. And I also have a motivation. I suppose my motivation comes from a strong passion for helping address training needs of the less fortunate communities, and in areas of social responsibility such as aged care, mental health, drugs and alcohol, which is Paul's passion as well. So now in my role, I feel that I've got to combine the passions I have for everything by utilising learning design, educational techniques with the technology, and humanising the experiences where learners develop all of those skills that they need for the future-ready workforce. That's me.
Thanks, Dianne and Paul. That was wonderful. Hey, we might jump over to you now to give us, you're in a bit of a different area, which is that financial services education. So introduce yourself and let us know why you're so passionate about what you do in education.
Okay, before I start, in my previous lives, I was an English teacher. So I don't know, I was also a financial advisor with 7 years experience running my own business. And what I've come across was everybody thinks finance, economics is all hard, numbers and math. But actually, financial education is like English teaching or anything else. It's about people. The reason why I think all of us would prefer this to be with a glass of wine, meeting people instead of over Zoom, yeah? Or enjoying the lovely day outside. We're human beings, ultimately. And that's what financial education does. It empowers people to live the life they want. And I think we should all have access to that. It's just a resource, yeah? So people think, oh, money, economics, is all these guys in blue suits. Definitely not a woman of color like me, not from English teaching to finance. I ended up over-educating myself, I guess, because I now can teach other financial advisors or investment, and I actually worked on post-Royal Commission to review as well. And what I realized was there's a gap between people who can afford financial advice that's independent of the big four banks and AMP selling their products and what we can afford. So Brainy Bucks basically is totally independent. We do corporate training, so you can, as Mel said, teach a man to fish or woman to fish, right? In an easy part, because finance is not really that hard, because let's face it, if it was, why are there so many people making money, right? It's like medicine or anything, it's just education, and that's what we hope to do. So we go to your work, we give you what you need and only what you need, and we use that corporate training revenue to fund community training. So we offer free financial advice on Fridays at Incubator, for example, because that's disruption. We don't get paid, but we're willing to give you a free education and you've got no excuses. That's us.
Thanks, Hae. That's awesome. And Catherine, who actually my daughter Olive has been piloting some of her programs, which has been a lot of fun.
We love Olive.
A little bit too high for what I can do outside of that. Would you like to share with us what it is that you do, a bit about yourself and why you're so passionate about education?
Happy to, Morgan. And I love seeing Olive when we have Zooms with you at home and she's crawling over your shoulders and she knows one of the main science characters, Dr. Cecilia Moon, which I love. So I'm Dr. Catherine Fargher. I'm the creative director of Dr. Egg Adventures. I'm an educator. I'm also a script writer for theatre and new media and games. And now I'm organising an online education resource. So my initial passion for this project was actually ignited as part of research. So that's interesting. Morgan was saying the incubator, it's a real intersection of the uni, business, commercial ideas and innovation ideas. My doctorate of creative arts at Wollongong Uni, I was exploring ways of engaging young audiences in scientific and ethical subject matter like genetics and ethics, but through, really accessible, engaging ways. So I created a series of scientific sort of morality tales exploring new genetic futures. And one of these became a really successful play that was using animation and puppetry. It was produced by the Sydney Opera House. It toured in Chicago and Canada. It just sort of had a life of its own, and it won awards in Australia, and Chicago won the equivalent of a Tony Award in Chicago. And as a result, the Australia Council for the Arts gave us quite a big series, 3 grants from 2012 to 14 to create it into an interactive story world with a science theme. So it's set in a laboratory, it's a scientific story world, animated characters. And I worked with some screen professionals on that. So initially we were trying to combine both entertainment and education. As I'd worked in both fields, I was an educator, but I was a theatre artist and a digital writer. But since coming to the Incubator Hub in 2017, with expert business advice and encouragement to establish an advisory board, it's really as a result of that advisory board, we really started to focus specifically on the educational side of the equation. And we've also been really fortunate to partner with a tech voucher grant from the Department of Industry and an MVP grant from the Treasury Department. We've got a partnership with Macquarie School of Education. So senior STEM lecturer, Dr. Anne Forbes. So she's partnered with us on all of the kind of curriculum aspect of the project, and also introduced us to hub schools. And so we've also been running a research project out of the School of Education with pre and in-service teachers, just seeing how well Dr. Egg-Adventure's scientific investigation module actually teaches. So we're sort of doing teacher professional development as they teach students. So my passion is the kind of creative story world, like Paul was talking about, the kind of creativity. Dr. Anne Forbes' passion is the sort of educational curriculum. And yeah, our research showed that many primary school teachers actually need specialist training in science teaching. They have to teach it now as part of the national curriculum, but they don't have the training. And so we've developed a resource that both the kids hopefully engage with really strongly to learn science, and also teachers learn as they teach. So yeah, my passion is really, I guess, the, creating imaginative spaces where kids can really explore those 21st century learning skills. So creativity, critical thinking, just thinking of ideas outside the box, innovating. And I guess we're sort of really excited that we've been able to kind of merge together all of our skill sets. So the research in the uni, and now this kind of really commercial focus through the incubator.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Catherine. And it just sort of occurs to me as we're sitting here talking, we've got this really great panel that spans across so many different parts of the life cycle, right? We're looking at education in school. We're looking at education in that transition from school to higher education into work. And we're looking at that education that we all need in our adult lives around financial services. So what I will say now is that if anybody's got any questions that you think of that you'd like to throw to the panel, please put them in the chat as soon as you think of them, and we'll get to them and get them discussed. So, but in lieu of that, I'd like to start with Hae with a directed question, and just thinking about us, adults and, financial services, it does seem like a pretty scary thing. I've just settled on my first house, and that was a really, really nervous sort of experience. But you know more than anyone what it means to be educated in financially. So what's being disrupted currently in the financial services sector? What are the kinds of trends that you're seeing?
Well, technology, yeah. I love investment space because we learn things like YesVR or new technologies that's coming up. I put something on LinkedIn, which basically has all these apps, lists of apps, platforms, lots of disruption going on in financial sector. In a way, it's excellent because this means whether you're a high schooler or high net worth individual, you can have your little phone and buy shares and Bitcoin and NFTs or whatever. The bad thing is, if you don't have basic information, it's like giving a 14-year-old keys to a Ferrari. You can get into trouble. So that's why our company is called Brainy Bucks, because bringing it back to understanding what your emotions are and whether that's driving your decision financially. Like, you have a house, but is it because everybody else has a house and I got to buy a house, even though it might not be the best thing for your personal circumstances? So we try to draw it back to say, what's best for you? That's all. So
that's really interesting.
Stuff, yeah. It's really about you. That's
so. You mentioned apps. That's kind of this is something we haven't discussed before, but in terms of education, like traditionally you would say education is about, you got to go do a course, study the course, then you go through, and then you can do whatever it is you need to do. It sounds like, especially with financial services, education may be actually improving the service, or like through some of those apps you were talking about.
It is, Morgan, in some way, but I'm also concerned, and so are the other advisors who do the right thing, yeah? Independent advisors who want to make your life positive or better. That's why you come. Like, you go to a dentist to get less pain, right? Or better teeth. Same with good financial advice. And because I came out of education sector and I did come to investment because I was also headhunter. So I came through the back office, which is about risk management, yeah? Instead of saying, oh, gung-ho, let's go faster, boys, this sort of stuff, which is what financial sector is. So I could see a lot of it is jargon, and that's what the industry is based on. It's to make it look difficult. And everybody wears blue suits or black suits for a reason, right? Nowadays, if you go into your local financial planner, they're trying to make you, they'll offer you a cup of coffee and all this sort of stuff. But it's really psychological. And traditionally, you'd have to go to university or do the diploma of financial planning, which is what I taught as well. But now I'm actually marking people online, like you guys. Everything's online, right? And also, instead of doing actual role play to demonstrate that I understand Morgan's personal needs, it could be done online, which is a bit of a worry, because is it as good as practical experience? I don't know. If it's a doctor giving me a shot for my COVID, I would like them to have practiced on something other than, rubber people or something online. So yeah, there's lots of apps and platforms and things, but we want to empower you so you can say, nah, don't need it. Or maybe I should find some more information, and where can I get it? And that's what we do. Brainy Bucks will point you to free stuff that's available, not the rubbish.
Nice one. And that's really interesting. So, and I'm just thinking in terms of, to get that money to buy that house, this is how I segue, guys. To get that money to buy that house, I need to have a job. And Paul and Dianne, I know you guys have been doing so much work in terms of improving the job readiness of graduates. So I was wondering, what are some of the new technologies that you guys have been seeing in that space?
Okay, well, I could start, Morgan. So, look, I think a really good example of this is to look no further than what's happening right now in Sydney with COVID. So the current outbreak started with an airport driver that wasn't properly following the rules. Now, this goes back to his training or lack of. Another examples are hotel security guards. How many leaks were there even before this incident? Because many of them weren't properly trained. So just imagine if you could actually train these staff by actually placing them in a difficult work situation and them having to deal with this environment and see the consequences firsthand of not doing things correctly. And all of this in a safe space. Well, of course, there are many different training scenarios where this can be applied. It could be a nurse or a doctor in emergency department at a hospital, or a hospitality worker who has to refuse service to an intoxicated customer in a bar, or a chemist staff dealing with a person with mental health issues. And we've just seen an example of that yesterday on the news overnight. It had serious consequences. So these are, as you know, VR is that technology that can actually place staff in these situations, and they can make choices and see the consequences of them in real time, all the time, while they have a guide or an expert guiding them through. And they can do this as many times as needed until they get the correct training. And if they actually experience it in a safe space, but experience the stress of that situation while staying safe, when it actually occurs, then they're able to deal with that appropriately. Over to you, Dianne.
Well, you've covered a fair bit of what I had to say as well. So what I can base our ways of improving the job readiness for graduates is that we've gone into a lot of research about the benefits of technology, such as the VR Advantage report by PricewaterhouseCoopers that was released end of last year. And using the technologies such as what we do with the VR, the virtual reality, and the 360-degree videos within the formal education streams, and also to introduce new realistic work integrated experiences, I think that will help transform the learning into the performance and behavioural outcomes that's required. So, you know, in having said that, I think during our conversation, Morgan, we talked about, but how do you retain the rigor of assessment? Everybody wants to know about that, you know. And so from our perspective, it's a holistic approach, including the sound framework in which you base the learning design for these and the assessment types, but also the data and the analytics that provide the insights into schools' performance levels from a business or organisation's perspective. And for the graduate, it's about the self-reflection, the motivation to improve your score or marks, and also to achieve what we call as the optimal path through the scenario of what we design. The stats in that report is quite remarkable when you think about it. It says about improving job readiness. The user is, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, 4 times faster to train than in a classroom, 4 times more focused than their e-learning peers, 3 times more confident to apply skills after they've experienced the VR training. But there's also other, you know, quite interesting factors about companies that engage their learners as opposed to those that have, you know, very low engagement rates for their training. And I think they said the revenue increases, I think Mark asked a question about that, it supposedly increases by 2.5, you know, times of what they would normally have for people that are less engaged in the training. So that you can see there's quite a difference.
Yeah, and going back to one of the examples that I gave, we created a whole series around the RSA, or Responsible Service of Alcohol. And currently, people that go into the hospitality industry, they do like a one-day course or an online course. Now, my son did that course, and he went through and did a find within a PDF and did the answers. He had done the course in half an hour. So he was actually qualified to serve people at a bar. Can you imagine how shocking it'd be when you get a really aggressive person that they want their drink, and, you know, you've got to deal with that, and you're like 20 years old, you know. But if they could actually experience that before they actually went into the workplace, then that's just, you know, absolutely superior to any type of, you know, workplace training that you could possibly do. And also with VR as well, as opposed to doing like a role play. If you're in a role play situation in a room full of people, then you're sort of mindful, and you're aware of everybody looking at you, and you're not really doing the role play properly. But if you put on a VR headset, you're there, you're in that space.
You shouldn't have
And
the
so-
distractions.
That's right, no distractions. And it depends how you design the VR as well, because there's VR and VR. So what we do is we really get really involved with the learning design. So we have high-level learning design. We've actually won 3 LearnX awards for our learning design. We have really good professional actors. So we try to maintain that really high level all the way through. So, you know, there's learning and there's learning even in VR as well. And VR isn't suitable for all types of learning either. So it can slot into other types of learning. And, you know, the example I gave before about, well, actually, no, I haven't given it yet, but Walmart in America, they're actually training over 2.2 million staff using just VR. So in some cases, you can do your complete training in VR. So yeah.
That's so interesting. I think so the idea that a company engaging a learner can increase ultimately that can increase revenue. That's
Absolutely.
a really clear benefit of having engaging learning. But it's making, I wanted to direct a question towards Catherine, where sometimes those metrics aren't as I guess out there in the open. You're working in a much more traditional kind of sector like the education market. What are some of the barriers that you've been experiencing with disrupting primary education?
Yeah, thanks, Morgan. It's really interesting because, I mean, COVID's obviously been a huge disruptor in that I think teachers are dealing with, well, firstly, it was just, you know, learning from home, the technology challenges, which is a big one. And now you've also got the fact that kids can potentially transmit COVID. So just first, you know, our trials within schools have been put back. Well, they were put back for a whole year in 2019. And we didn't start trialing until this year, sorry, 2020. We started trialing this year, but moving into schools during this time of COVID has been really tricky. You know, we've got the entry points in the education system include teachers and principals, obviously, and their administrators. And there's peak bodies that govern the product that's being used. So for instance, with government school and as we move into a more and more, on the one hand, governments want us to be innovative and disruptive. On the other hand, we've seen, and, you know, sometimes Australia gets called, you know, a nanny state, or is that we're getting more and more bureaucratized. So, and sometimes that's understandable, but there's accreditation and standards that are set for the Department of Education, which are for public schools. Then there's other national accreditations, which Catholic, so NESA, which is the national standard of accreditation. Now, on the one hand, these benchmarks are fantastic, obviously, because there's benchmarks around technology compliance and content, but we all know if we work in the technology sector that platforms are changing all the time. So even in the last 5 to 7 years, you've got a whole lot of platforms that talk to each other, like HubSpot, Slack, all of those kinds of things. If schools are working with an old technology and you're being required to plug into one sort of technology, one, the kind of financial costs to get your product aligned is massive. So large companies that are already in schools are now having to change to, you know, particular technology platforms for the learning management systems. And then if you're doing something quite innovative, you find that there's the sort of technology side of it, but then also there is the curriculum side of it. So now the curriculum turns over every 3 to 5 years. It's both national and it's also state. So you've got that kind of minefield that you see in politics, you see it in law, that you've got lots of regulation because understandably, you know, kids' education and what they're taught is important, but it means that it's inherently conservative. And even though teachers can disrupt them a little bit in their classroom, there's some big kind of gatekeepers. So in terms of the disruption that we're passionate about, where we want kids to enter into this kind of new dimension of imagination by using and engaging with this kind of gamified world. And, Paul and Dianne are talking about that as well, to get that critical and creative thinking happening, which is what we're told is really important in the 21st century. And to find those hidden things. Like I watched that film Hidden Figures the other night about the mathematicians getting the spaceships into space. And Kevin Costner, the boss, goes, you want to look behind the figures and see solutions and pathways that aren't even there yet. We're trying to do that in a highly regulated sphere, trying to bring in even a little bit of kookiness, a little bit of imagination can be harder than you think. So on the one hand, we've been very supported. We've had a lot of support from the School of Education, and we're going through a tender process with the Department of Education. It's nonetheless very and I was interested to share this question actually with YesVR a little bit, because sometimes you need to be able to very quickly pivot and create new programs and new content for the new circumstances. And you're then sort of hampered by this very slow entry into the actual place where you would use it. So the final thing I was going to say, the final barrier is that I think for VC investors and angel, they very quickly fill up their EduTech slate because it's a very slow return. It's a slow, you've got one buying window in the year, which is normally the third term, and then that's it for the year. So it's a very, I guess maybe a bit like the publishing industry where it's big at Christmas, there's a sort of a once yearly big purchase. So you've got to be very geared to that. And I think investors are aware of that. It's not, and that's why a lot of EduTech has gone via parents. I think because parents can buy any time of the year, school holidays, we're bored, let's do something, whereas schools are very, very on a particular track. So that's the long answer to that short question.
Yeah, I can really relate to that old technology piece. I worked at a company once. I've also worked at a company that had some EduTech and working with banks. And the banks are so risk averse that those tier one banks are always like 1,000 versions of some browser back than everybody else. Like it's not even supported anymore. So anything that you want to develop with those groups, you have to we have to make sure that it works on this, but then the client also wants it to work on an iPad, but it has to have Flash because that old browser needs Flash, but Flash doesn't work on an iPad. So it starts to create all these different kinds of challenges when you do have to work into that older technology. You can totally relate. We've got some really great questions in the chat. I just wanted to see if anybody was brave enough to take themselves off mute and ask their question. And I thought Ian Bellert's question was really good and worth us having a bit of a chat about. Ian, are you there, and would you like to come off mute? If not, I can ask it. Ian's question was, I've just scrolled down. Do you think it's important to teach kids that it's okay for an idea to fail?
Yeah, I think I answered Ian to a certain extent there, and I believe it is. It's important for all of us to experience. I mean, fail is that dirty word that nobody wants to, admit that they do, but we all do. In everything we do, some things work out better than others. But if you don't have that experience of what's good, bad, otherwise, how do you develop your own repertoire of strategies? How do you become more resilient, and how do you anticipate? So to me, it's a really important part of the learning process. And I don't think it's damaging.
Yeah,
I mean, I think Daniel put something in there about the Silicon Valley. Of course, you've got to fail. You've got to have that experience to go through that and to know the losses, the impact.
I remember Mark from Crimoja, who I can see on the screen, saying to me, "Oh, they say that if you succeed with the product that you went in with, you've entered the market. Or if the product you entered the market with succeeds, that you've entered the market too early. Like you've got to kind of, you've got to pivot and change. But I was going to say about the failing thing, the thing that's been exciting about working with a STEM educated leader in Australia and internationally is that she's kind of really built into our product this self-determination kind of based theory where kids develop their own autonomy. And so they, before we give any solutions to things, they come up with problems, which allows for that kooky and creative thinking. And then we kind of give scaffolded learning. So very much they free range in the Dr. Egg world with, and that idea of kids being able to just try ideas out, which is one where they have the fun. It's like when you were talking about VR and, you know, hey, when you're talking about, you know, just kind of like exploring something that is fun, you know, the fun aspect. Like, I mean, anything gamified, anything where you can play or be yourself is always going to be more exciting than any kind of rote learning, which the computer people call that, the game designer people call that chocolate coated broccoli, where you sort of like, they give you a piece of broccoli, they say, oh, this is nice, look, it's covered in chocolate, but really underneath it's kind of what you were always learning. So I think that innovation is you know, innovation means that you do have to allow people to try things around the edges. And I think also then certain things will start to survive and start to become strong, and certain things will emerge as what kids want to do, like how fan fiction and things emerge from particular stories like Harry Potter or whatever. You know, I think markets emerge and trends emerge by people being creative.
Nice one. We've got another really great question to follow up with. Graham. Walker, do you want to take yourself off mute and ask your question?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Hi, Graham.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, thanks, mate.
Yeah, so look, from somebody who works within the VR space, I know that VR has recently been kind of said that it can teach empathy, particularly maybe with children, maybe kind of interacting with autistic children and things like that. But what are your thoughts on how immersive technology can really be used in this regard?
Do you want me to do it, or do you want to? You're on mute, Paul.
Oh, you can start, Dianne.
Yeah, okay. Good to see you online, Graham. Look, I believe it can be utilised for that, because the way of what we do in our learning design, I know that there are animations and things like that, but what we do is when we're creating something, I will script a dialogue, but I will also have particular actors using their facial expressions, their body language, their tone, and all of those other communication skills, so that it creates the empathy. Or we provide an example where, you know, we want somebody to acknowledge that they aren't empathetic towards that, so that they actually develop their emotional intelligence as they go along, and they learn by observation and practice. So the learners, when they put the headset on, or even in the browser, they will develop the more empathy as they go along. They can experience what it's like and improve upon it by getting the feedback from either within that experience, or it can be used outside of it by universities, for example. They might add something else into it separately to that. It's like a work integrated learning model.
Yeah, and if I could just add as well, there's two types of VR. So there's the the 360 film VR, that's what we do, and there's the animated type. So a lot of people talk about VR and they immediately think of games in the animated space. So for empathy type of training, we feel that the 360 video version of VR, which is with real people, they're right there, you're right in that space, is a much better solution for empathy training. Whereas the animated type of VR is really good for practical sort of skills. Could be firefighting, or, you know, a technician somewhere, or performing an operation, that sort of thing. So yeah, there's the two types, and you know, they're good for for empathy training, particularly what we do. We feel that there's a lot of research on that it's really, really effective, like being in that real space and having those real people in front of you. So they're the two different types.
Nice one. We've also got a guest appearance here from, you mentioned Mark from Crew Mojo, who is also one of our startups here at the Macquarie Incubator. Mark, did you want to pop yourself off mute and say hi and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Morgan. I was really keen to know, from a corporate perspective that's looking at different training options, is there a huge difference between the cost from traditional training versus what they would need to outlay for a VR experience they might need to introduce to their teams?
You're on mute, Paul.
Okay, so Mark, in that PwC report, they were actually training managers, I think, over in Britain, and they worked out the cost-effective ratio at 1,700 employees. It was the same cost as traditional training. However, you still have to keep in mind that the VR training was way more effective. So you can weigh those things up as well.
And it's also the fact that the training, corporate training, it's an ongoing cost, whereas with the VR, how it's been programmed is that you can experience it over and over and over.
Yeah. And for example, we have in hospitality, we have a suite of RSA, we have a suite of customer service. So that's already built. So if corporations or organizations want to use that training for their staff, then the cost can be quite a lot lower because a lot of organizations can use that. So it just depends on the way they use it. But if you want to build a bespoke scenario, then it's a lot more costly than 2D film, for example.
But it's a little bit, just Mark, it's a little bit like how when we've done your sort of review process with Crew Mojo, it's the gamified factor makes it quite fun. And I teach kind of video game at Macquarie, and one thing that's really interesting is that kids have just intrinsic motivation. This is adults as well. There's intrinsic motivation to have fun and play these kind of things. And I know when I've been at various VR fairs down at Science Alive in Adelaide, it's a bit like playing golf. You can have so much fun. I mean, this was more like saber light dancing or something, but like it's very enjoyable. And so, playing those role plays in a 3D VR environment is really enjoyable. And so that kind of, when you compare that to the sort of average strategic training scenario, and I mean, the most fun thing would be like what Hae said, having the coffee or the drink at the water cooler would be more fun than the actual training itself. Whereas VR, and that can be quite, there's an intrinsic motivation.
I can give you another bit of a fun thing that happened when we set up Blacktown Workers Club with their VR training. And we had a couple of the floor managers there, and they were trying it out. And everyone tried out a scenario or two. And these guys, around 50 years old, they would not take the headset off. And on top of that,
answering their phone calls,
answering their phone calls. Well, they had the headset on. They just wanted to go through the whole thing. Like, people are really blown away with it. And until you really try it, you don't really get it. You're actually transported to another space.
I suppose I just want to add, sorry, from my point of view, in when you build, like, because what's VR is what is it replacing? And one of those things that, if you think about traditional compliance education, where it's a tick a box exercise, generally speaking, we get these, even here at the uni, we have all these e-learning modules we have to do. Every organization we know, every big one has these e-learning modules because it's on scale, it's on mass. We're able to measure, everyone's done that course on harassment, they've done this, they've done that. But one of the big challenges in delivering compliance education is that you can't really, measure it in terms of its effectiveness. You say we had this many people did the course, but we can't actually say this many people are able to determine truly the difference between, the right answer in that particular scenario. So when if you can have something that's immersive, like a VR kind of approach that gets people out of the, in that sort of zone where they're able to be immersed in what we, navigate the gray of an ethical situation, it's quite different to doing an e-learning module just on the screen. So I think, so that's where you can kind of see that as well, that sort of there's quantifiable value in something that is going to be much more engaging and immersive in the corporate sector. I wanted to, we've got Daniel on the, who's one of our mentors, is talking about an academy that he's running. I thought I might get Daniel to, if you want to take yourself off mute and tell us what you've been thinking about during this session.
Sure. Thanks, Morgan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Look, first of all, thank you so much for some, I'm finding out a lot of really interesting things and fascinating. And the overlap for me, of course, is I'm highly involved with innovation. As Morgan said, I'm a mentor at the Incubator, but I also work for a global organization and I run their training academy. So again, certainly keen to learn more, and this is a perfect topic for me. VR and AR, of course, is a very exciting space to be in. My question in the chat was one of the things we're exploring at the training academy where I work is hybrid training. Of course, many people are looking into this at the moment, running hybrid training. Of course, some people joining via Zoom like this, and with a camera to the room and the trainer, and then the others in the room as well. It's limited in terms of its interactivity. It obviously has it needs a lot of training and coaching for the trainer to understand how to facilitate smoothly. Otherwise, it tends to be a bit staccato in terms of dealing with two separate audiences. But you know, one of the things is we always want to enhance that experience, and certainly VR has a potential role to play with that. And I never really thought about VR being something live, but of course I know that in the future there's going to be a lot of remote vehicles, like remote ships and trucks and drones, and the drivers of those won't be in those vehicles, they'll be far away. So I know that there'll be some kind of visual VR-like remote to do that, but I don't know where the technology is at in terms of VR at its current capabilities. Can that be live? Could there be a situation where our remote attendees can be sent a VR device and then they could then join the classroom by putting it on and feel almost as if they're there? Is that something that's a viable option?
Yes, Daniel, that's
we've come across that.
Yeah, that's there's a few different areas of that. In fact, I think just today I saw an article on, I think it's Facebook Horizon meeting rooms, I think it is. So Horizon work rooms, so remote collaboration. And so there was something else through Facebook as well, but there are other organizations that I know of as well, one in Perth called Facilitate, that can facilitate that type of meeting.
And they have avatars for the students in a common room.
There's quite a few things out there now, so you can definitely do that. I think with Horizons as well, what one of our developers was talking about that this morning, is saying that, you know, you can come in with a headset, and if you can't, you can still come in remotely and you can be represented by an avatar. So there's quite a few options around that. The only thing is, just be mindful with VR. You don't want to have the headset on for too long. So the current headsets, there's some really amazing headsets out there, the Oculus Go and the Pico and HTC Focus, really, really fantastic deluxe headsets, I would call it. And, you know, there's no cables or anything involved anymore. And then you've got the $5 cardboard. So, you know, it's different headsets out there, but training, you don't want it to go for more than like 10 or 20 minutes at a time and have a break with VR, because people can get tired or a bit disoriented. So you need to have, like, say, at least a 5 or 10 minute break between going through scenarios, for example. So I don't think sitting there for hours with a headset at the moment could be a bit, I don't know how effective that would be, but there certainly is that capability currently, that's for sure. And thanks for the question, Dianne.
Yeah, great. Thank you. That's exciting stuff. Appreciate that.
Excellent. So we're getting to that pointy end of the session where we're going to need to wrap up fairly soon. I wanted to throw one more question. I do want to talk about the Innovation District Challenge very shortly, but one more question to each of you. And that's, what's the one big thing that you're positive about seeing in the future of education? So you might start with Hae. We haven't heard from you for a little bit.
You're on mute.
Yeah, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
That's why we hadn't heard from you.
That's why you've probably been talking this
You're
whole
on
time.
mute.
And,
Yeah, got it.
No, I just got another call coming through the other one I was on. Basically, one positive thing is technology. It's also our enemy, but it's positive because where else in history have we been able to access information like we do now? In investment, it's amazing. I mean, with Elon Musk, you've got the Neuralink happening. We've got, I just read an investment report last night about how we can invest in technology. Tankers are remote, self-driving floating tankers. So with education, anybody can get anything, which also opens up a Pandora's box, but I think that's a positive thing. Yeah.
Brilliant. Paul and Dianne, what's your final thought?
I'll let him go.
I'm on mute as usual. Okay. Well, I'd like to really see more education training organizations, as well as corporates, taking up immersive learning. So, as I said before, if we look at the US, they usually are faster adopters when it comes to innovation. And right now, as I said, Walmart are training over 2 million of their employees through VR. So I feel like we're at the tipping point here in Australia, and we are well placed to be able to help organizations come into this really exciting space. Dianne?
Just to add on to that as well, Daniel, I pick up your comment about how we actually introduce all of this. And I think the important thing is seeing the technology used, one, effectively, but also utilised throughout the lifelong education and career continuum, so that you've got graduates that are coming out as part of a very adaptable, emotionally intelligent, critical thinking, future ready workforce, and then it's a win-win for everybody. That's my one thing. I had five.
You got one of five for everyone. Thank you. And Catherine, one big thing, what are you excited about?
Well, I guess it's exciting in education that there's a really big transition happening from sort of, I guess, more traditionally trained teachers into quite digital natives, kind of becoming teachers, becoming librarians, all of the students. So you've got a much more even playing field, which is going to emerge in the next sort of 5 years, where there's a lot of openness to innovation. So a little bit like the tipping point that was just mentioned, that blended learning, exploring the digital and integrated curriculum where you can really be multimodal, but also across disciplines, which is where I'm really passionate: science, creativity, and education, where it can all meet. So I think, the future is bright. You can see it behind us.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much. I want to give a round of applause to Hae, Dianne, Catherine, and Paul. Applauses don't really work too well.
Thanks, Morgan.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes, I can see a few on the chat. So thank you so much. It's just been really amazing. We really really appreciate you guys doing this for us. As it's always great to hear from the startups in our incubator and the amazing things that you guys are doing and seeing in this field, and education is so important.
We're very lucky, Morgan, to have the incubator as well as the Venture Cafe, because without that support too, Paul and I have said earlier that we've had such a benefit from the education programs too. So thank you, guys.
Absolutely.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you.
Well, people don't say thank you enough, So
oh, well,
we pop that in there.
Yeah, well, I mean,
yeah, I definitely
I paid Dianne to say that, everyone. So
I think it's cross-fertilization of ideas too, and support, slugging it away. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Well, it's great for me because I get to test out all your products. So it's awesome.
Anytime. We welcome anybody, anytime. Well, we're a bit locked down at the moment, but
But please, everyone, do follow our different companies on our socials and stuff like that. I don't know. I chucked mine up. I don't know if the others want to, but
Chuck your
So
stuff.
If anyone knows some great primary schools that are open to innovation, and they can be small or large, we're going to be piloting in term 4 and the first term of 2022, as well as launching our spring promotion with our teacher, early career teacher subscription. So your teachers at your kids' school can learn science and be experts.
Brilliant.
So, yeah. All right. Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
If anyone is on the line and you want to hear more about the Innovation District Challenge, stay on and we'll be happy to tell you all about it. It's maybe a bit less exciting, but it is interesting nonetheless. So we at Macquarie University, with all the other New South Wales-based research institutes, are a part of the Innovation Districts Challenge. We are currently recruiting for Challenge 3, which is the final of the 3 challenges. To give you a bit of a background on what it is exactly, it's the New South Wales government calling out for R&D solutions that strengthen the entrepreneurship capability of the state post-COVID-19 economy. So the solutions that they're looking for must be scalable and research-based technology products or services. Proposed projects could include, and it's pretty wild here, but here's some examples. So help sectors pivot to high growth technology solutions, strengthen Australians' sovereign capability and local supply chains, implement a sustainable and novel solution to an area in need of reform, such as aged care or food security, address the workforce gap created by international closures. That could be something to do with students or reduced migration, or champion Indigenous entrepreneurs. So what everybody's really interested in is knowing how much money is on the line for this. So the total funding pool available for each challenge is around $500,000, and they'll be awarded over the 3 highest ranked applicants. So the top ranked applicant will get $250,000. The second ranked applicant will get $100,000. The third ranked will get $30,000. And then the top applicant from each research institute will get $10,000. So Macquarie University has partnered with Western Sydney University and CSIRO. So the 3 of us are working together on this challenge. So we're working out the best ways that we can support applicants to get through this process and through to the next round. This first round will cut off, applications are open now. First round will cut off at the end of next Friday, where we will then have a panel meet, and there'll be some judging going on. The top 3 applicants from each institution will go through to the next round. So very exciting news. In the last challenge, in our cohort that we assessed, we actually had one of the winners. So we had someone who won the $250,000 grant, which was very exciting for all of us. So there is some, let me get my little.
Was that your link, Morgan, or was that another group?
It was another group.
Oh, okay.
Let me just have a quick look. Okay, so share screen, very exciting stuff. So this is the eligibility criteria. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yep. So in order to be eligible to enter, these are the basic things that you need to know. You need to have your ABN registered in New South Wales. You need to be based in New South Wales, fewer than 200 employees, so they don't want massive corporates for this. Have been trading for at least 12 months. You need to, and now this is really important, and this is a thing that's really been a sticking point in the last few challenges as well. You need to have at least 75,000 sales revenue in the last 12 months, but they've made a change, which is they're also going to include or expenditure within the last 12 months. So if you're a startup you haven't made any sales revenue, but you've been in building your product and you've spent 75,000 in the last 12 months, you'll be eligible for this. And you need a product or service that intends to market within 12 months. So it can't be something that you're going to apply for it and then, it'll be, in 20 years, we're going to have this product. And they really want to see something immediately. and at least 75 Australian ownership. I think it goes without saying, but yeah, we do need to make clear that anyone who's applying to be eligible, it needs to be an Australian-based business. So applications are open. If anyone wants to apply, you can apply through Macquarie University, or you can apply through Western Sydney University, or you can apply through CSIRO. Essentially, just pick the one that's closest to you location-wise, and then apply through us. All the other universities are participating in that as well. So if you're closer to someone else and you prefer to go through them, feel free to do that. Of course, I'd love to have everyone come through Macquarie, but that's just me. So yeah, there you go.
Morgan, I was interested with that 75K expenditure. We worked out that we could meet that if we included director sort of salary, but our accountant sort of said, look, don't include that yet because of it kind of builds up too much of a loan. But if you could prove that through an accountant's letter, like along with your other expenditure, would that be eligible or not? Probably.
You could definitely have a crack. It's one of those things where they definitely want to see it in black and white.
Yeah.
That is the case, because I did challenge this a little bit.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where, because what we understand is that startups are trying to do everything as leanly as you can. That's what we teach, and that's what that's just the way it works, right?
Yeah.
But they really want to see something. So understand your situation. If you can get a letter that states that, then it's worth. You can go through the application. I have got a link that you can use to go through the eligibility process.
Okay.
So it's worth it. It's worth a shot.
Yes. Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any questions?
No.
All good. Well,
I feel like I know your companies better now, which is really cool.
Yeah.
It's when you are very innovative, because I do think Australia is a slower adopter. And, I think when you look at people like Elon Musk and just how broad, how kooky their thinking is. And yet, I know when I've been in America at South by Southwest and places, the billionaires that are the keynote speakers at places like that are so out there, that satellite developers, that transmit, there's so much kind of, that very kind of open-minded, innovative individual can really have a place in the American ecosystem. And I'm not sure whether we're quite there in Australia, but we just keep plugging away in our little way.
And getting back to that point before about failure, the VCs in America, they'll want you to have failed quite a few times. That's like a prerequisite, because they'll know that you've learned from that. Whereas in Australia, it's like, oh, failure, it's a big thing. So different mindset, I guess.
Yeah, so interesting. Yeah.